Hello, you beautiful musicians, and welcome back to the Musician Guidance Podcast. I'm Mack, founder of Musician Guidance and co-host of today's podcast, joined alongside my fellow host, Marc Swersky, a two-time Grammy winner with 50 million album copies sold and a musician guidance mentor. Marc, it's always a pleasure to chat. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And I'm very excited about this. And as always, everything that Musicians Guidance tries to do to help fledgling artists, and I actually believe not only fledgling artists, but I think established artists can all benefit from what Musician Guidance brings to the table. Congratulations, Mac, on what you're doing.
Thank you, Marc. I really appreciate the kind words. And I'm definitely super excited for today's episode too, because we have the privilege to be joined by an entrepreneur who founded the world's first and only automated music publishing platform called Aurign, which will help musical artists collect the publishing royalties they deserve in a secure and transparent way. Without further ado, Aurign founder, Robert Hatcher, thank you for taking the time to join us. How are you doing today?
Man, thank you. I'm doing excellent. I feel it's a privilege and an honor, man, to be here with you guys. And anything. I think we had a conversation earlier. Our missions are aligned. I got into what I'm doing to help artists, and I love what you guys are doing. So, I think it's I love the fact that we can exchange ideas and share information on a global scale to help each other out and grow as a community, as artists. So, I'm very, very excited to be here.
Definitely. And the pleasure is truly ours. And just to get started here, I'm sure Marc has some questions and I definitely have some regarding Aurign. But just before we dive into talking about the platform, I would like to meet the brains behind it and yourself. Can you share a little bit about yourself, your background in music and in business?
No, absolutely. So a little bit about myself. Grew up originally from Alabama. Played basketball. Played a little junior college, which is how I got to Atlanta. Played JUCO ball, tore my knee, and I got an academic scholarship to Georgia State. Came up, my brother and best friend who I've known for 20 years is a music producer. We've been writing music since probably I was like 14. And that he was really focused on the music path. I kind of got more into business. And as I started to grow in my academics, both on the business side, and then I kind of made a switch to get more on the technical side of things in terms of data science, web development. I started to see how I could use my skills from a technical standpoint to solve some of the issues that he was dealing with in terms of the music business. So huge fan of music. I'm talking anything from, I'm a big fan of the 70s. Love hip hop, love R&B. I still think the 70s has the best music because, when the 80s came, it's when you start to digitize. You had more machines, you had less musicians. And, it's like when you listen to the 70s from an instrumentation, people had to work harder to be better in order to get the music out. So, I love everything where music is and where it's going. But, I'm just a little tidbit. I'm a big 70s guy. Love Marvin Gaye, Temptations, the Isley Brothers. I like the old school, but also big fan of like Nas and Jay-Z and etc. So that's a little bit about myself.
Awesome. Well, that was music.
Dude, you want to get married? I'm joking.
That was music to Marc's ears right there.
Yes, indeed.
I applaud you. I applaud you. Thank you for saying all that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely music to your ears, right, Marc?
Yes, it is.
Well, you're an inspiration, Robert, and I'm going to pass the baton over to Marc, so to speak, because Marc, I know you have some questions, so fire away.
Well, first of all, Robert, again, it's just a pleasure to meet you, and that you took the time to do this. I think what Mack is trying to do with Musicians Guidance is actually very important, and I was lucky enough to be asked by Mack from the very get-go to be one of his mentors, and I've taken a lot of pride in that and tried to help him, and I try to help as many artists as I can. And I think, I just believe that what Mack is trying to do is get rid of this term that I used earlier with you, the great unknown, so many artists.
Right.
And the problem, I believe a huge problem in the business is the fact that so many young artists have no sense of history. They don't actually even understand what the mechanics of the music business is, and let's call it for what it is. The music business that we know, that we reference, is really only about a little over 60 years old. It's still a relatively new business. It's, and there's a lot to be said for that, but because of technology and the world, it's gotten watered down from both I believe from a creation side, but it's also got watered down from a business mechanic and a technological and the nuts and bolts of what it is. And listen, I've been blessed to be in this business now and been successful for over 40 years. I still don't understand it all. and you know, and I try to do my best to keep up with it and learn. And again, going back to Musicians Guidance and Mack, he's trying to find people that want to give back, that want to help. And let's call it for what it is. Right now, this business is owned lock, stock, and barrel by technology companies. The record companies that we know of really are a shell of what they used to be. They're really not even, they're not the foundation of the music business anymore. They're really nothing more than banks. They don't do artist development anymore. And if they do, the artist development in more cases than not is based off of research. So that's a massive problem, because how do you expect the business to evolve if there's no development? And most people at labels right now, I'm sorry to say, and they get pissed at me, they wouldn't know what artist development meant if it came and smacked them in the face and said, this is artist development. They'd look at you like, what are you, crazy? What are the research numbers? That's a big, because they're answering to banks. On the publishing side, there's a lot of great publishers out there. But going back to where your company comes in is much more aligned to where the publishers sit. It's much more valuable. I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, it's geared more towards the creator of the music, the actual people that are creating the music, the songwriters, the producers. It's got the chance to benefit, probably in the long run, the musicians that play on records, all the people that are involved in the creation of it. You're looking out for those people. But most people don't know that. They don't realize how to register a song, how to break apart splits of a song, how to do this. I mean, I found out last week in a conversation with a very major songwriter, producer in LA. We were talking about a song that, you know, we're going to work on. And he said to me, dude, I can, you know, we can get these couple of people to play on the track. We just have to give them a piece of the songwriting. It's like, why? He goes, well, that's what everybody does in LA right now. They're not paying anybody to play anything. They're giving them a piece of the song. It's like, really? What's that got to do with writing melody, music and melody and lyrics? And he was like, nothing. That's just the way the business is going. And it's like, doesn't that water it down even more? And he said, yes, but there is a lot of people that live in a certain world, and it's mostly the hip hop world that's how they're cutting their songs apart. Back to your company, what you're trying to do is figure it out at source. Help the songwriter to figure out at source. How do you see your company positioning itself? With filling us in a little, as much as you can, about your company, because I believe it's in beta right now. How do you see yourself being of value to the creative community, but also to align with some like what Mack's ethos and musicians' ethos is all about? How do you see yourself aligning with that?
No, that's a great point. And you know, I think the reason why I love Mack's ethos is because, you know, it kind of started from the same. You know, you talk about helping music artists. The reason why I started this, because I wanted to help my co-founder, my brother, who's a music producer, who, you know, is an up and coming artist, you know, is really talented, you know, and he was telling me how he has like a quarter of his own publishing catalog that's tied into disputes. And, you know, I was curious. I was like, you know, how does that happen? And, you know, it basically just comes down to communication or miscommunication. you have multiple people that work on a record, but all those people that work on the record don't necessarily know each other. They may know the main person or the performing artist and etc. So when comes down to the registration process and everybody goes in and registers for themselves, if they don't communicate with the other people, then they may not know that the percentages that they think they're about to register, if it's actually accurate. We've also been in situations, where, like you said, artists don't know how to properly register. So you'll have a guy that's, that comes off more experience and say, hey, I'll register that for you. And they take advantage. And if it was supposed to be a 50-50 split, they may do an 80-20 split. And what we wanted to do in terms of what we wanted to bring to the creators is a level of transparency. So what our product does, we actually create a table that outlines the equity percentages of all the artists. So it's like you upload a song that you want to register, then whoever's the main artist, they will send out the actual a request, or they will send a request like, hey, Mark, I'm gonna send you 50% of this work. I'm gonna send you 25%. Then Mack, I'm gonna send you 25%. And the other things that we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that the registration process was as easy and want to create a sense of validity. So we have certain things or certain parameters where like you can never send over 100% of a record. So we have certain parameters in place. So that way the artists can manage it themselves. And then what we do on the back end is we automate the entire process. So at the artist level, what we want to do with our product is essentially, only thing that you have to do is just send out requests of equity and accept it. When you sign up, we'll collect your publishing information. We'll kind of help, guide you through that. So that way, from that point on forward, you won't have to write out all of your first name, last name, IPI, pro, all the information over and over and over, because the publishing process today is extremely tedious. You have to essentially fill out a form for every song that you register, which is, why people, don't like the process. And what we wanted to do is right. And that's, a lot of people don't know, but there's like $1 billion that goes unclaimed every single year in publishing
black box money.
And a lot of that just has to go with a lot of artists, to your point. They know about the masters that they can collect from distribution. And it's like either they don't know about the publishing, or they don't know how to register for the publishing, or it's because it takes such a longer time to collect the publishing. Sometimes they just kind of wait and sit on it, and royalties just accumulate and nobody claims them. So what we wanted to do is just digitize that process. Whereas an artist, you don't have to go and learn the publishing process industry as I did. The only thing that you'll have to do is essentially just send out and accept your equity. So we wanted to make things as easy as possible, because being artists, and especially for my brother, we know how difficult it could be in terms of trying to start a career. But I think what's really interesting now, as we think about the age that we're in terms of technology and videos and etc., I think artists, like a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old artist, they can put out music today and it can grow and accumulate over the next 10 years.
Absolutely.
I think the long game for artists is going to be so pivotal for them. And I think that being able to manage your publishing and giving you other opportunities such as sync licensing and et cetera, I think is going to open the door, and it's going to be more opportunity than there's ever been. So I think I'm really excited about what we're trying to position ourselves to help the new generation of artists manage and collect their money, especially on the publishing side.
I think that's brilliant what you guys are doing, but I want to add two sides. I want to add a couple.
Please.
Okay. First of all, you said a statement, and I'm gonna blow your mind. Okay. You said a statement about young artists. There's a lot of young artists. I want to tell you how many records I've done in the last handful of years for artists that are a little older, a little more, they're new artists that they hit 40 years old and they want to make their first record. And people come to me all the time and say, Mark, should we do this? And it's like, well, yes, because I'm a firm believer in life. You should never go to your grave with woulda, shoulda, coulda. You should never do that. You should try to fulfill your dream. You know, nothing would be greater. In the old days, it used to be, man, let me hand my grandkids this piece of plastic and metal, and they could listen to it, which is a CD. You know, people don't really, you know, as we all know, I know there's a huge underbelly to try to bring CDs back, just as vinyls are coming back. And I don't think it may not, I think there may be some inroads towards that, but it's now going to be, can I have my streaming out there forever so I can hand it off to my grandkids? But you have to know that most of these people, the second thing they say to me, well, will you handle all the registration for me? Because I don't want to do that, because I also run a consulting business. And it's like, sure. But what you're trying to do is make it simplistic for anybody to be able to do it. So I think the beauty of what you're doing, it could be a 10-year-old, it could be a 60-year-old. It just doesn't matter. It's about creating transparency and simplicity at source. So I think that's a big part of what I think that's even a bigger selling point. I think your demographic that you could sell what you're doing to is massive. On the flip side, let's take one step back. How many new people really even understand what publishing is? You're talking about all this stuff, but most people don't realize there's different factions of it. And it boils down to, more than anything, there's a mechanical side, and there's three things: a mechanical, a performance, and an ownership. And those three, if they're not talking to each other, you're going to leave that $1 billion worth of money in the black box out there for nobody to get. So I think it's so important for, really, if you're going to be somebody that wants to enter this business, is please learn what these things are. If everybody strives for the big sync license, well, you don't even realize how you're getting paid on the sync license. Do you realize that if somebody comes to you and wants to give you $10,000, how you're splitting that $10,000 up? The $10,000 just doesn't go to one person. It just doesn't go to the artist. You're splitting it down the middle between sync and master ownership. And then out of the master ownership, and on both sides, there's mechanicals to both sides. And everybody has to be paid for everything. But most people don't realize that. They don't understand the mechanics of the business. And I believe, Robert, if your company can help people to understand at source the mechanics of this business, it makes you even that much more valuable. Because I know that's what Mack's trying to do. He's trying to tell people at source, you have to understand the mechanics of the business. So absolutely. So for me, I bring up these points because I think they're very valuable to the community that we're talking to. And that's my long dissertation on that. I think that right now, as you explained, you're in beta form. Why don't you explain to us, is there a vetting process on who you're taking into your beta form right now? Or are you guys basically saying, here's the beta form, let's open it up to people and see what happens? And what's your conversation with your beta community?
Yeah, so we've anybody can go to our website at www.aurign.com and sign up for the beta. So this is actually our what we call this is technically like our second beta. So our first one, what we call like our alpha beta, this is like our beta. And the difference between the two in this, and I'm actually curious to get your perspective on this as well. At first, in our alpha beta, it was all independent music artists. And what came from that is we learned like some of those artists were actually, signed to a publisher or independent publisher. And they started coming to us because they was like, oh, this eliminates us from doing all the paperwork, because essentially we automate, the split sheet format, et cetera. And we started to generate a lot of interest from, independent publishers, a couple of independent record labels, and publishing companies, and et cetera. And what we did was we kind of, not I want to say pivot, but we expanded the product to make sure that we could actually introduce it to independent publishers, record labels, and etc. Because to my surprise, what I did not know was that even a lot of major artists are actually signed to independent record labels, who then outsource the publishing aspect to a major like Sony or Universal or Warner, because those major companies have an entire department of publishing admins who data entry positions, where the only thing that they're doing is every single day is they're typing in this information. They're typing in the information for every single song, the ownership for every single song, they're registering it for everybody. And a lot of small to medium sized publishing companies and record labels don't have the bandwidth or the operations capital to hire that many positions. And what they saw with our product is a way to actually allow them to keep that in-house. Instead of by us automating that process, they don't need to hire a person to come in and type in this information all day. And so our beta now is actually kind of working with a little bit more of independent labels and publishers. And I think the power with that is, and we also do like bulk registration with all the international, so we collect royalties in 193 different territories. I think in our current beta, we're working with a little bit more smaller businesses. It's probably like 70-30. So it's like 70% of the customer base is record labels and independent publishers, and then 30% of it is artists. And when we get ready to launch, the product will be available for both. But I thought one of the interesting learnings that we've received from the alpha and the transition to the beta in terms of where we are today is actually allowing independent publishers and independent record labels a way to manage the publishing process for themselves, because it kind of blew me away in terms of how many of them were actually outsourcing this to either a law firm or to a major publisher like Sony or Warner.
That's fantastic. I think the other elephant in the room on that is how many major catalogs are being swallowed up by the quote by quote venture capital companies. I mean, call it what you want to do. At the end of the day, Hypnosis is a venture capital company. That's what they are.
Right.
They're and all these companies are partnering with the Blackstones and all these companies to buy up these catalogs. And I think a huge thing is that they're being forced to hire infrastructure, where what you're basically saying is, if we can get this to the place we want to, we're your infrastructure. You guys can focus on the creative side, because I think that's another big part of the problem. When I got into the music business 400,000 years ago, I never thought I'd be a business. I didn't think about being necessarily a businessman. I just wanted to play guitar, play bass guitar, play keyboards. And then I wanted to be a songwriter, and then I wanted to be a record producer. And all I wanted to do is create. And now, as I said, you have this whole thing about catalogs and all this stuff, and catalogs are worth everything. And I've been, I recently had one of my major catalogs revert back to me, and I've had these companies come to me and either want to offer me some money for them, or, tell me they could do administration for me and blah, blah, blah. And then I see what they're going to take for it. And I say to them, I have the same question. But what are you going to do for me?
Yep.
What are you going to do for me? Because how is this music's got to get out there? Are you guys going to do that? Well, and it's, again, it's an age old question. How do artists get their music out there? What your company is doing is not helping them on the creative side to get their music out there. It's actually solving the first solution at source, which is how to properly protect yourself across the board to make sure that you're doing. And I believe that what you're doing will and can become valuable to these quote by quote venture capitalist companies doing that. I'm going to ask another question, and I'm sure that there's a lot of this that you can't divulge, because I wouldn't expect you to be able to, because we're coming. And I am also telling you, I understand it. I have major leeriness towards it. And I think we're 3 to 5 years before it's going to actually come to a fruition. How do you see Aurign happening in the Web3 world? Because that's the bigger elephant coming down the road.
Yeah, I think what I'll say on that is similar to the same thing that we're doing with the publishing. The whether it's Web3 or whether it's Web2, whether it's publishing, whether it's streaming or selling NFTs, the problem still exists in terms of who gets paid and who owns the asset, and what is the process that we have to make sure that we're accounting for the owners of this particular asset. That problem is extremely messy, regardless if the final form is an MP3 or the final form is an NFT. There still has to be a process to account for the equity holders or the owners of that particular record. And I think that the fun part about what we're doing is that it'll work in either space. Web 2 with MP3s or Web 3 with NFTs. I think that's, to your point, our biggest goal and focus is making sure that we're capturing the owners of a record at source and allowing people to manage that for themselves. I think you brought up a really good point earlier about the music industry and how you got into the industry, and it's like, as most artists, you artists coming into this to create music, right? If you're a music artist, you didn't come in here to become a lawyer or a publisher. You came here to create music. I think one of the things that's interesting in terms of the evolution of the music artist and of the music business, if you think about like 15, 20 years ago, distribution, marketing, and production all got disrupted, right? It's like, before, you needed a label to cover the cost of manufacturing physical CDs. Now anybody can distribute their music to Spotify, Apple Music, etc., all over the world. So now the artist has the capability to distribute around the world. Marketing, you still, at the early 2000s, you still needed the label for marketing because they controlled the only two channels to market, which was radio and television. Now every artist has the capability to have their own social media platform to create their own community and to market themselves. And I think and I'll say the last thing, and this is maybe a little bit predates before the 2000s, but was talking about like production. Before, you needed a studio that you would have to pay hundreds of dollars, a lot of equipment to, in order to produce music. Thousands, thousands, $100 an hour to produce music. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Lupe Fiasco. Just dropped his latest album, and he did it in 72 hours using GarageBand and $100 USB mic. And it's a quality project. It's really good. So all those, the production, the distribution, and the marketing, all gave access to artists to essentially manage themselves, to create for themselves, market for themselves, and then distribute for themselves. And what came in that transition is, or what we weren't prepared for, is also the ability to manage the business of the distribution and the marketing and et cetera, because it comes with it. And artists weren't necessarily, none of us were really prepared for that, transition. So I feel like we're all, as I think about things in relationship to time. So I think about where we are today, where we were 10 years ago, and kind of where I think we may be in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think as we continue to evolve, this conversation continues to become repetitive, but creates awareness for artists, 10 years from now, it will become standard for artists to release music and understand where the music or where the revenue is coming from. And I think that it's important for artists to kind of get on that now, because whoever understands it the best can take advantage. And more importantly, not just take advantage of technology and the opportunity that you have as an artist, but you'll be able to not get taken advantage of by the more that you know, which is even more important. So I think it's a really interesting time. And then I'll get off my soapbox with this, but this was something that I was recently at a conference, and I was talking to a gentleman who was the former CEO of Evernote. Really, really smart guy. Bay Area, really intelligent, working on another startup, and he was talking about how this is like the most. I think he used the word the most changiest time in history. If you just look at across the board over so many verticals and sectors, the world is going through a real transformation, and it hasn't formulated like what it would be for the next 50 to 100 years. We're really in a transition period. So I think that with technology, and as we talked about with the NFTs earlier, so Web3, like that's where we are in Web3 is like where we were in AOL. It hasn't solidified itself. There's people are excited by the potential. And even when I talk about NFT, sometimes I have to, be careful with myself, because as a nerd, essentially as a tech, when I'm talking about NFTs, I'm talking about process. I'm talking about the process of the technology. A lot of people, are talking about actually like selling, a monkey or a painting of a monkey. They're talking about some type of assets or et cetera. I'm talking about the actual process of a non-fungible token. And that is still working itself out. And we're probably about 2 to 3 years away. But I'm really excited because, to your point, everything has to start with the source, and how we position ourselves in terms of understanding the ownership. And I think once we have that, then you can have a credible ledger of who owns what. And that's going to diminish a lot of problems and keep people from losing royalties, and also allowing artists to manage their business and understanding the leverage that they have. As you said, as labels today operate more like banks. So if they go and do a deal, they can understand that, well, I already have this publishing, I have, it's accumulating this type of revenue, I have more leverage, and you can make the labels or even banks or whoever to compete for your service.
Yeah, I think that you've just spit out the answers to about 5 questions I had, which is fantastic. And I hope everybody really, really pays attention to what Robert just said, because he really just, I believe, he opened up the door for the elephant to walk out of the room. And that has to all start to materialize. And I also think that I do believe that one of the things that's beautiful about what you're doing is, I think there's a lot of people that are afraid to put music out, and they're afraid to put it out there because you're afraid you're going to get ripped off. And you don't even know how. Again, if I knew there was a service out there that could simplify a part of the process that's very difficult to deal with, it would make maybe the thought of trying to put music out there even better.
Yeah.
But my thing is that, in fairness to you and the future of your company, I don't even know if this has to stop at music. Yeah. I think to go to film like video creators, film creators. I think this could go to photographers. And I think the biggest reason I say is because, nowadays when you go do a songwriting session, major songwriters go do songwriting sessions, whether they have a major publishing deal or not, do you know that people have to sign a piece of paper first? And what the song, it's a song split piece of paper. And there's also something for more established songwriters, and I frankly think it's a very fair thing. It's called walk-in fees. And what the walk-in fees are is you get brought, and I'm not even considered a top songwriter, but I'm a fairly successful songwriter. But I got news for you. With most independent artists, I want to be paid for my expertise, because that independent record that you're doing is your doing. You have to be the one to make that record work. If you hire me as a producer, you're hiring me as a producer. You're not hiring me to, my wear as a producer, I give you my fee. If you want to work with me, you pay my fee. I don't even, people say to me all the time, well, what about back end money? Back end money in the music industry is very leery right now. It used to be a time to where you used to do a record and not only did you negotiate your fee, but you negotiated royalties on the back end, which is something that your company would help at the same time too. You would get 3 points or 5 points or 1 point or 2 points as the producer. And you would collect that money. It became, just a mailbox check that as long as a record, a song or whatever it is still doing well, you're going to make money. But that's dissipating right now because nobody's selling that many records anymore. There's not that much money to split up in the pie anymore. So when I go do a record right now, it's very important, or write a song with somebody right now, A, you get paid something. It's my choice if I don't want to get paid. B, if I am, regardless of what it is, I still have to be registered. It still has to be taken care of at source so that this way we all can do this. And that is, again, for the future of this business, it's a big problem. I will tell you something too, Robert, and I don't know if you guys ever thought of this. There are a lot of people out there that have a lot of music sitting around that have never done anything with it.
Right.
Or, like, for instance, I just got my catalog back, one of my catalog back. How easy would the process be for somebody to take their catalog that they had with another major company? All the administration has to happen. It's all been registered in the world, but it's something that you guys thinking about to make that process easier, where I could go to Aurign and say, this is my printout. I need to set this up for collection for the future. Is that something you guys are thinking about, where you can ingest an entire catalog?
100%. That's, one of the things that in this current beta, we're working with a couple of independent publishers in terms of like catalog management. The transfer from, and that's some of the processes that we're implementing now before we launch for those independent publishers, labels, and et cetera. Where if you were using an existing platform and you want to transfer, having what's called a letter of relinquishment, which is just basically a letter that says, hey, this person is no longer my publishing admin and this person will be. Or if you are your own publisher, and again, you just want to collect for yourself, having that process where, you could just put in the Excel file, will essentially give you a template outline. You could just put in the Excel file, our product or our platform will digest that. And then we'll send that off to all the pros internationally, as well as the Mechanical Rights Society internationally. So that way you can just keep it and collect it for yourself.
I tell you,
that's perfect. That's exactly where we are right now, putting in those processes together.
Well, listen, I think that this has been, I hope that people take away from this how valuable what Robert and his company are doing, because we could probably spend 5 hours going back and forth and throwing ideas back and everything, and we'll find a way. But it's funny, we could do that, and we're going to get new information constantly, but it's all going to revert back to one place, the source.
Absolutely.
And again, for Mack and Musicians Guidance, it all goes back to the source of who the artist is and what the artist has to and needs to do and is willing to do to get themselves in a better position to be able to understand, the mechanics of the business, and also to hopefully leave themselves the time to learn and to benefit on how to create music better and put it out there. And for me, I think both sources are so valuable. And I hope more people take advantage of this, because I'm telling you all, if it doesn't, as Robert said, we're in the AOL phase right now. We are definitely in the AOL phase. We don't have any clue what this is going to look like in 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. We don't have we have no clue. But what I will say one thing, what I do see happening, and this is very valuable, is when I work with very young artists now, they all have an understanding that there is an elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I'm starting to notice is, as creators, they want to get better. They realize that they haven't paid the dues and they don't know everything.
Right.
And then when it comes to the other side of it, they all ask questions about the business. That's what boggles my mind. They want to know about the business, where I'm sorry to say, but I think there's a very large faction of the millennials that didn't even realize there was a business involved. They just create music and they put it out there and they throw it out there and they don't realize how much, and I'm sorry to generalize it, but I see it, because they've been privy to this mass breakdown that you talked about before. There was a disconnect, there was a breakdown, a disconnect. And they didn't realize all the things, and then the simplicity in this world that we live in now, which is instant gratification. Well, you have 60,000 songs a day being uploaded worldwide to Spotify and these other services. I am sorry to say this, and Mack has heard me say this before, but less than 1% of them will ever get heard by anybody except for your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your best friends. And you're throwing this stuff out there, and you're just not learning the basics, the truth. And successful entrepreneurs, if you're in the music business right now, you are an entrepreneur. You have to not only create your music, you have to create your brand. If you're going to create your brand, you have to also create your prose, what you're going to say. You have to be, all of them have to talk to each other. Listen, I hate to say it. If you go to a record company right now or a publisher and ask them to brand you, this is what's going to happen. They don't know what they're doing anymore. They don't have the infrastructure. It's like, hire a branding agency, hire an ad company or a marketing company to do that. It used to be that you had to go to a publisher. When I first came into the business, I was very lucky. I got a publishing deal, a major publishing deal at a very young age. So for the first 10 years of my career, maybe 12 years, I never had to do anything except for write my songs, hand them cassettes, tell them who the songwriters are, tell them who, what the splits were. And they went and did all the work. Then all of a sudden, when I got out of my first publishing deal, and I started creating a body of music, was like, wait, I got to go do all this stuff. And I hate to say I'm making myself a little old here, but we're going back almost 30 years ago that happened. 28 years ago is when I got out of my first publishing deal. And then I had no publishing deal for a long time. And then I got offered another major publishing deal. So again, that same set of mechanics happened where I just, I was registering my own stuff, but then they took up and registered stuff. Now I got out of that publishing deal and I have my own catalog. That's my catalog, no one else's catalog. And, I have to be diligent on top of it. I'm the first one to tell you, man, everybody, I forget to register songs sometimes. And sometimes this is the best way to leave this. I'll find out that my co-creator registered the songs and the splits were all wrong. And so you have no idea how difficult it is to go back to your PROs and to go back to the labels and get them to adjust that stuff. It is a landmine. So for me, I'd like to say thank you for being on the forefront and and creating something in this world. I think you have great things in front of you. I think you are a necessity. I hope people pay attention. Mack, I pray that you keep putting this out there for people, because this is so important for people. Educate, teach, give back, learn. It's the great unknown out there, but it's exciting.
Exactly.
It is.
And I know I kind of took the back seat throughout this, but it's just, you both have been, spewing pearls of wisdom, if I may. So I didn't want to interrupt in hopes that, our listeners can really understand what was being said and that it hits home with them, because it's so important. And And Robert, I'll just ask you, I know you're in beta version. When can we expect this to launch? And also when it does, what are the future plans for it? And I know, as Mark said, this could change tomorrow, this could change in 2 years. It's very up in the air, but
Right.
I'd just like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we're planning to launch at the end of the year. When we launch, the plan is to really just help. Probably circle back with you. We want to start with. It looks like we'll probably start with independent artists as well as independent publishers, and really kind of just help them get onboarded, show them how to register for themselves. I think it'd be fair. I think it's going to simplify the process 1,000 times than what it is today. And kind of what Mark was saying, it allows people to register with their other co-collaborators in agreement. So that way you can register correctly. Because today there's nothing that keeps you from registering incorrectly. I think that's the crazy part about
Right.
the industry. As well as even if you work with somebody, there's nothing that keeps somebody else from registering the wrong information. It's out of your control. Somebody can mess up your split sheet, and it's totally out of your control. And I think this is a process that provides a level of transparency that allows you to build trust. I think as artists, so much of this industry is based on relationships, and I think the more that you can show that you can do good business, the more people are going to want to work with you. So I think this is going to be extremely helpful, and our focus is to help publishing companies, independent record labels, as well as independent artists who have to outsource or don't know how to manage publishing for themselves, and give them a tool that shows them how to simply manage it for themselves.
Amazing. And do you have anything to add there, Mark? I'm going to do that too.
Man, really appreciate you guys. I'm like I said, man, I'm extremely honored, and our ethos is in alignment. I feel like we both got into this to do the same thing. So I'm extremely honored to share this platform with you guys.
I appreciate it.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I want to learn more. I want to discuss more.
Absolutely.
I think that there's, I can honestly say, not just as a creator, but as a businessman, I'm pretty darn excited.
Right. Likewise.
I can't stress that anymore. Mack, thank you. Thank you for bringing us together.
Thank you for both of your times. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to keep the synergy going and continue this conversation, after this podcast and well into the future. Robert,
absolutely.
Definitely. If there's anything we missed or something you were hoping we were going to ask and didn't, I'd like to give yourself an opportunity now to just share anything you would like. Is there anything that comes to mind?
No, I think I feel like we covered a lot.
We certainly.
Yeah. I thought it was a great conversation. I don't think I have anything on top of mind. I think we covered everything that I could think of. Just love to get any feedback, from your demographic and from your viewers. Any questions that they may have, I'd love to kind of follow up with you and see if I can continue to be helpful in any way.
Definitely. And can they reach out to you directly or?
Absolutely. You can follow me on IG. You can reach out to us. Our company Instagram is Aurign, AURIGN.studio. Or you could reach out to me personally. My IG is Origin of a Hustler, AURIGNOFAHUSTLER.
Awesome. And I'll have that in the description too.
Okay.
Perfect. So yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time, and you're always welcome to come back on this podcast. And as I said before, we'll keep in touch. In the meantime, though,
awesome.
That is going to conclude this episode. And for those listening in, let Robert be an inspiration and motivating factor to yourself that with hard work, dedication, and an openness to learn, you can and will achieve what you put your mind to. Until next time, take care, everybody, and keep making music.
There you go. Have a good one.